welcome to today's webinar with Contact Monkey and PRSA. We're going to be talking about engagement rates, and the topic of conversation is, wait, are my email open rates shitty? We're going to be talking about industry benchmarks and realistically just how to send better emails. So just to introduce myself, my name is Brianne Charter. I am the Director of Sales here at Contact Monkey. I've been with the organization for just about 4.5 years now. Been working with internal communications professionals to help them not only get a better sense of how they're engaging with their employee population, but also help them show the ROI on the work that they're doing and connect their work to strategic initiatives that are happening within the organization. So that's a little bit about me. And insofar as our agenda for the day, we are going to be talking about how your email comms stack up against others, how to send emails that actually get open, read, and engaged with, as well as email best practices. So things that you can actually put into effect today and start seeing results. And then it's not mentioned here on the agenda, but we're also going to be doing a Q&A so that, I can answer any questions that you might have. But like I mentioned, I do want to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions throughout, please feel free to type them in the chat and we'll answer them towards the end of our conversation today. Awesome. So how do your email open rates stack up? So every year, Contact Monkey, we do a global state of internal comms survey. So we are surveying, across 140,000 email campaigns, as well as 20 different industries. So we're talking everything from A to Z, automotive, non-for-profit, education, utilities, we got it all, because we really wanted to get a good idea of the landscape of how are internal emails performing. We didn't just survey, your Fortune 500 or, companies that are over 10,000 employees. We really got a good landscape of how emails were performing from companies from 1 to 50 employees, as well as 10,000 upwards. However, in terms of the vast majority, our sweet spot is really within that 1 to 5,000 employees. They made up probably the majority, I would say, with 37% of the companies that we surveyed. So you got a good range here. So let's talk about averages. And we'll talk a little bit about how averages can be helpful, as well as maybe not so much when you're looking at your own engagement rates. I also want to use this as a time so that we can all get aligned on the definitions of what we're talking about when we speak to these different engagement rates. So email open rates, pretty straightforward. It refers to the percentage of recipients who opened the email out of all the people you sent the email to. So on the high scale of things, we saw, a 99% open rate. On the lowest, we saw people struggling maybe a little bit with email opens at 10%. And that brought our average to a 69% open rate. Now, let's talk about click rate. I know sometimes open rate can be a little bit more, not controversial, but there are tools these days that make it look like emails have been automatically opened. And so you don't get a true sense if someone is actually opening that email and reading through it. So a click rate is better because it shows you that, hey, I've sent content out to my audience. They have opened the email, and I've actually included something that is compelling enough to open that email. So it is the percentage, of recipients who have opened on an email and clicked on an email out of the total recipients that the email has been sent to. Okay. So on the high end of things, we saw 98%, the lower end being just 1%, bringing our average to 10. And this is industry agnostic and agnostic of company size as well. And then we have our average click to open rate. So this is a truer sense of, the quality of content that is in your communication, because this is looking at the percentage of recipients who clicked on an email of the total number of recipients who opened the email. So with your click rate, that's taking into account all of the recipients. With your click to open, it is looking specifically at the people who out of the people who opened an email, how many people actually clicked. So it's actually going to be a little bit of a higher percentage typically. So here we have 99% for the highest, 1% again for the lowest, but it brings your average to 14. It really gives you a sense that you have created something intriguing enough in your copy that people want to learn more about or read more about. And we're going to touch on that later. So as registrants started coming in, we wanted to look at what industries do we have here today. Some of the themes that we saw were media, as well as consulting and technology. So get ready to type into the chat, looking to understand what industry are you in? And we'll piggyback that on to another question of, is anyone willing to share their open rates, their click rates, or even their click to open rates? Do you know what your metrics are? So I'll give it a second to see if anyone is brave enough to either put it in the chat, once again, safe place here, or you can send it to me directly. John's in media. John, do you know what your engagement rates are? We got folks in tech as well. Education, open rate sitting about 60%, click to open, 1%, 40%. I appreciate the transparency. We're going to talk about how it really ranges. And I have an example of that. So let's move on. Feel free to keep sharing in the chat as you open those up. I know, John, you are looking yours up. So there are industry highs and lows. Okay. So it really ranges. So on your open rates here, you can see we have a broad spectrum. So your metrics are really going to vary wildly depending on the industry that you're in. So for open rates, consulting is topping the charts off at 79%. On the lower end, we have media and entertainment sitting at 57%. Now, we might ask ourselves why. For me, when I'm speaking to clients, media, you might be getting a lot more emails coming to your inbox. You might be competing, against the noise. So how do you stand out? You may also have people who are not necessarily always sitting behind a desk. So they are, out in the field, speaking with people. Maybe they're not always checking their phones, checking their emails. So you have to really get their attention when they do go there. Consulting, on the other hand, maybe those folks are behind a screen most of the day. They're checking their emails because they're communicating with clients. So, maybe they're more compelled to open up emails when they get them because it's a trained and learned behavior. So that's why you're getting that end of the spectrum. Highest click rate, we have insurance with 15%. It's an industry where regulations, there are things that are changing all the time. They need to be in the know of what is going on. It's the same thing with metals and mining with the highest click to open rate at 20%. We're talking about health and safety. People need to know information that you're sharing with them. So it's not a surprise that that is going to be higher versus, telecommunications. It's a tough one. right? Maybe you don't have such an engaged workforce. Maybe some of the things that you're sharing are more educational on things that they have to do their job, and outside of their 9 to 5, they're not looking to open and learn more. So we can talk about things that we can do to kind of combat those struggles that we see. So this is just a glimpse for you to get an understanding of how varied the results are when you look at email metrics by industry. So this is a sample size of the industries that we surveyed here. We have our open rates, our average click rate, and then our average click to open. Obviously, if you have a little green triangle beside, you are performing higher than industry average of that, if we remember, 69%. And then if we have a pink triangle beside your number, you're performing lower than industry average. And that just means that there's some work to do, or maybe you're facing some additional adherent challenges. Okay. But this is why, and I'll touch on this later again, the averages across industries, it's not really helpful. You want to actually be looking at your industry specific metrics if possible, because of the range that we see. It's not really fair to compare something like telecom to something like construction or education. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides. It also ranges by company size. So you can see here that we looked at not only the industry, but also broke it down by company size. So typically you see that folks within the 1 to 50 people are in the know, they're opening and engaging with their comms. And same with that 500 to 1,000. So it really is going to range. We need to take into account not only your industry, but also your organizational size as well. And this is why you can't, or you shouldn't, rely on generalized metrics in order to benchmark yourself when you're looking at how your emails are performing. So let's get into this next section here. We're going to talk about how to send emails that actually get read. They are best practices to gamify the system and really peddle your agenda to your audience, right? That is your job as internal communicators. It's making sure that the information that you have been given is dispersed and actually digested by your audience. So let's get into it. So first things first, we're going to talk about how to write a solid subject line. This is obviously going to impact what? Our open rate, right? We can't even worry about our click rate, our click to open rate, if people aren't opening your content. So really what you want to focus on here is writing attention grabbing subject lines. So you want to be specific and you want to be detailed, while also being really concise and to the point. So we don't want to do general subject lines like can't miss tactics for internal communicators. We want to do something like bad culture is the #1 reason why employees leave, right? It's like you want to know what that #1 thing is that you can make an impact on. You're going to be compelled to open the email. You want to avoid things that are, obviously boring, generic, have too many words, as well as jargon, right? I know something that is really big right now is using AI, and something that my team reminds me of all the time is using prompts that it's like, rewrite this at a 7th grade level, right? You want it to be really easy, really snappy and sharp so that people are more likely to open the email and it does not blend in. Try and bake it in. We want to bake in urgency, right? So instead of things like top internal email templates for 2024, not much urgency. 2024, you're referring to a large span of time. Whereas in the second, it's 8 email templates you need right now and can send by lunch. right? That means that it implies that it's not going to be a lot of work to you, and it's something that you can implement today and make an impact today. That's what we're all trying to do in our jobs. So eight, a digestible number. Words like right now are going to drive urgency. So including like timelines are going to help you with your open rates. Another example is like by tomorrow or send by lunch, right? So using action language. And then we want to aim for curiosity as well as personalization. So if you're using a tool that allows you to, Contact Monkey does, you can incorporate merge fields. So for example, the green check mark goes to, are you asking your team the right questions, Stan? So using tools that allow you to personalize your content. It's going to read more like a text message. Someone's going to think that that email was directly sent to them versus, once again, a more generic, engaging employee feedback tips for you. Right. Questions are also, I know people, there's debates of, does a question mark, does punctuation matter in a subject line? It does. It implies that there's going to be a call to action. And so I think when used correctly, having a question mark or a question posed in a subject line can be really powerful on sparking curiosity and getting people to engage in your content. So the next thing we want to talk about is timing. So timing is everything. And we can talk about this in a few different ways. This doesn't really apply to one-off emails that are typically like more ad hoc. I would say you still don't want to send an ad hoc email unless it's an absolute crisis on a Friday afternoon, because people might be a little bit more checked out than they are on a Tuesday morning when they're coming into the office. But if it is a repeated email that goes out, whether it's an update from an executive team or board, or maybe just a newsletter or wellness notice, we want to look to create cadence. People like routine. So people will look for these things, right? If they know that you send your newsletter out every Thursday afternoon, that's what they're going to look for and expect to see in their inbox after they come back for lunch. Having that frequency and cadence is going to increase your open rate. We want to establish consistency. And with that, establishing consistency is going to help you with not over communicating, right? We've all heard of people saying, email fatigue, there's too much coming at them. They don't know, it's too much information to digest. It gets lost in the clutter. Having a cadence of emails will allow you to aggregate and compile your communications and combine less time-sensitive emails into a single digest, right? That's way easier for them to read versus getting, 5 to 10 emails throughout the week. They're also getting communications from, HR, from maybe, tech or IT about security and compliance. And then they're getting face-to-face communication from their manager, hopefully. So as a communicator, you want to think about how and when are you communicating to your employee to reach them at an optimal time where they can digest that content. I'll plug that Contact Monkey has a content calendar. It actually helps you plan out your comms. That's something else that I can send to you if it would be helpful after today's session. The next is optimize for open rates, right? So we've already checked off and talked about using captivating subject lines. They really can make or break your open rate, right? Like if the subject line is not strong, you're not even getting your chance at reaching your employees, because it's probably going to go right to their deleted or like junk box, right? We want to identify best sending times so that you're reaching employees as they're opening up their emails. And then the last one is really important. It goes back to that, making sure that you're reaching your employee at the right time and sending them information that matters. When people are getting content, they're wondering, why is this relevant to me? So being able, whether it's innately within your HRIS system or you have a tool like Contact Monkey that allows you to create ad hoc or segmented lists, it ensures that you are getting the right contact. The right information to the right human, right? There's nothing worse than getting an email and being like, why was this sent to me? That's how you're starting to create that like email fatigue. And then when information that lands in their inbox that they actually need to open, they're not going to open it. So you want to make sure that the information is timely and that it's getting to the right audience. Next, we want to talk about optimal sending times. Do people here have a tool that allows them to see their best times for sending out content? If not, it really does make a difference. John is saying that MailChimp has a tool like that. Yep, Contact Monkey is one. I can talk about the difference between MailChimp, maybe John, towards the end of our time together here. But it really, a tool like Contact Monkey will give you the ability to understand when is the best time to send. You're going to get an idea of when do opens and clicks start dropping off, so that you can ensure that you are sending at the best times, right? So we want to make sure that we're sending not only the right day of the week, but also the right time of day. We want to know and keep in mind that effective sending times, it differs wildly from industry to industry. The same thing with your open and your click rates. And benchmarks have limited use if you're not collecting your own metrics, right? It's not going to help you to know your industry averages if you don't know what your own average is. So that's something to keep in mind, and something like a tool like Contact Monkey really helps with. So we want to make sure that we are sending with data on your side, whether it's Contact Monkey or something else, another tool. It's important that you are goal setting, right? I was actually speaking with a prospective client today, and they had a really specific goal that tied back to their organization's strategic initiatives on why they needed to improve not only their open rate, but click rate and employee attendance at events by 10%. That was their magic number for 2024. So it's really important that you are goal setting, but setting that goal realistically based off of where you are today. So whether you're concerned about clicks, opens, etc., that goal setting is going to really change what your content looks like, how you're sending, etc. You don't want to be sending blindly. You want to be sending around what you are trying to achieve. So I know this is like a really, this is not what our reporting looks like, but you can see here that this is an idea of the drop-off rate right here. It's like maybe this, whatever this is, maybe it's 3 p.m. That 3 p.m. is the time that you send before everything else drops off. So I said before, day and time matter. So of the 20 industries that we analyzed and benchmarked in the report, the most effective day to send an email communication, so 12 out of 20 industries reported that Monday was the best day to send an email. Not surprising, the least effective day was Sunday. You know what I mean? It's funny because, for someone like myself, Sunday night is when I open up my email. I check in with how my team ended for the week, and I prep for Monday. That's clearly, maybe I'm out of the two. Tech is maybe one of them. Everyone else, Monday. Most effective time, though, is 10 a.m. for 11 out of 20 industries. So Monday at 10 a.m. Least effective time, yes, this is Eastern, Brandy. Least effective time is 7 a.m. Reason being is they're probably getting a ton of other people emailing them, right? And so you get lost in the mix. Whereas by 10 a.m., email inbox has been cleared, so you're the first thing that pop up on their inbox. I believe that for the 7 a.m., it was hospitals and healthcare, because their days start early, right? But for everyone else, 10 a.m. is a good time. So let's go into best practices, tips, and trips. This is my favorite part because, we've now set the stage, but we can now actually look at how you can make an impact. And these are all really tactical things that you can do today. So the first is choosing the right layout. It's surprising of how many people, still don't have a concrete way that they communicate with their employees. External communication is like beautiful, right? Marketing has that done, covered. However, internal branding, that sometimes changes. So you want to choose the right layout, and design really can make or break how digestible an email is and how easy it is to scan. People scan, right? You pull out your phone or your email and you're scanning for information that is relevant to you. You want to make it easy for them to do that and that they can pick out the information that they need to read. So we're going to talk a little bit and we're going to break down the Z and F pattern. So the F pattern, this pattern is designed for scanning, and it works to prioritize the most important information in your newsletters. Employees are going to be reading at the first horizontal line of the content, so make sure that you're putting all the necessary information there. So you're going to have your headline, that's the first line of your F, and then maybe a smaller detail or description here. And then you can see at the bottom of the screen, my F starts again, right? Left to right, digestible little nuggets, if you will, of content for people to break down. Ursula said that this doesn't look like an internal email. It really varies. Shiseido is a client of ours. And for a lot of their emails, they're sending out, we obviously can't take their content, so the verbiage might be different, but they're letting their employees know about new product launches that are coming out. So we obviously don't share direct emails, internal emails from our clients with you all. This is more about the actual breakdown of the content and how it is positioned on the screen. Great call out, Ursula. And then we have the Z pattern. So this pattern imitates how Western readers scan text from left to right and top to bottom. This creates a Z-shaped pattern like you can see here, just going down the screen. The top elements of the email should be the most crucial pieces of information with detail in the middle, leading to a strong or bold CTA at the bottom. So you can see here, this is just repeating the save now, save now, save now. This could be a download here. This could be sign up for this event here, etc. But once again, really making it easy for people to scan through your content. So building strong and leading headers, right? These are call to actions to grab people's attention to look here. So we want to apply the same logic that we talked about for subject lines that we do with headers. We want to be concise and we want to be intriguing. We want to give the reader a clear idea of what they are either opting or opting out of reading more about. So clarity is really, really important here, including things like imagery, GIFs, memes, and having a strong personality inside of your content is really important. Clearing clutter, hard to read fonts, or inconsistent branding or colors is going to make it harder for people to read and dive into. What we're hearing more and more from our clients is that They're shifting away from plain text emails to content that looks more like what younger generations in the workforce are used to seeing, on their social media apps and things like that. They're used to really branded and formatted content. So that's where we're shifting towards, even if it's just a message from the CEO. We also want to make CTAs pop. So CTAs are call to actions, and they are a conversion driver, right? When we're talking about click rates or click to open rates, you need to make it stand out to your employees that you are asking them to do something, right? If people do not think that there is an action required, they are not going to take it. So obviously making sure that we are, making the call to action stand out in a way that matches your brand identity. You're sticking to a visual hierarchy, and you're using things like either a GIF, video, a button like you can see here to really make things pop. The other thing that you want to think about is you want to think about things from a security and compliance side as well. Employees are really smart, and they know that there are phishing attacks and that IT checks for those. So people hover over content and look to make sure that this is a legitimate link for them to go to. So you want to make sure that that matches your brand identity as well. Contact Monkey allows you to track through customized URLs. So people are looking at the detail when you're sending out content. Which brings me into like optimizing your design. Photos. If photos are linked somewhere, you want to make sure that that link is not to, Canva or somewhere else. It draws away from your overall email, and then also can lead employees to think that maybe the email is a little bit more sketchy than they thought it originally was, and might lead them to not engage with the content. Outlook and Gmail, they don't come with automatic features to allow you for things like click maps. Click maps, the reason why I'm bringing up this is it comes back to your click rate and your click to open rate. Depending on how you're designing your email, a click map will allow you to understand where the drop off is within your email, right? So you're able to understand, hey, people are clicking down here, though it's at the bottom of my email. Maybe I need to move that up. So this is an example for you all of what Contact Monkey's open rate looks like. We changed some of the content, but kept the gist of it the same. So how to read a click map, like I mentioned, here we're seeing how many clicks happened on that certain piece of content, and we can see the percentage of clicks. So we can see here that at Contact Monkey, people really care about team building, employee spotlights, and our end of quarter celebration and providing feedback there. Maybe not so much caring about our skill boosting alert. So what that tells us is that it gives us a really good sense of what our employees care about. Does it mean that we don't care as much about skill boosting? Maybe not. Maybe it means that that needs a little bit more massaging in terms of the content and the CTA. Maybe people just need more information, and that the newsletter should be a hub for other things like the employee events and such, because that's what employees really care about. And it's significant, 32 to 15, it's half, right? So it will give you a good idea of where employees are spending their time. Now we have some other email best practices. Really don't understate how important it is to keep communications mobile friendly, right? Even your newsletters, tools like Contact Monkey, Gmail is not going to let you do it. Outlook's not going to let you do it. You can choose what content shows on mobile versus desktop so that people aren't like endlessly scrolling to get to the content that matters before they swipe to delete. So it's really important that your newsletters, your communications are mobile, responsive, and friendly. Custom branding. You need to keep your communications consistent. People like consistency. They like to know what they are going to get in their inbox. It's like what we spoke about, the sending on a certain cadence or schedule. Your brand should resonate and be aligned with what you're sending outside to your customers. Your employees are your number one customer, right? They're the ones that are going to go out there and be your number one ambassador. You want to take advantage of collaboration tools. You want to make sure that communicators and stakeholders are on the same page. Contact Monkey has a way for you to collaborate with different users inside of the platform, but you want to make sure that communication is succinct across all of the departments that are sending comms so that there aren't conflicting messages and that everyone's in the loop. And then the last one, AI. I know a lot of people are wondering, and more people are using AI in their day-to-day, but AI is a great tool to solve for writer's block. Once you understand the key prompts that help you to achieve your brand voice, it can help with creating subject lines, it can help with creating your call to actions, and even some of your content. So don't be scared of AI. I use it all the time to write emails or trainings for my team. It's a great tool. You're always going to have to tweak, but once you get a hold of it, it really can be your friend and help you in saving time. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today and the content that I wanted to cover. I saw some questions thrown into the chat here. So I'm just going to scroll through this quickly, but if there were any other questions that folks had now, I would love to have you toss them into the chat and I'd be happy to address those. And yes, Mariah, it would be 10 a.m. local time. Exactly. Does Contact Monkey have any governing tips on internal comms uses AI? Yeah, so what we're seeing more and more, Contact Monkey has an integration with OpenAI so that you can use it inside of the platform. I know more and more organizations are starting to purchase and implement their own AI that is more secure. What I would say is, don't necessarily toss in any really confidential information into OpenAI or ChatGPT, but it's not going to hurt you to throw in a subject line or your call to actions. So I think that would be a good boundary to play around with. And then stay in touch with your compliance team. They are so aware of your organizations and organizations as a whole use and adoption of AI. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that they're not already talking about. What do I think about using humor for internal communications? I think it's great as long as it is in line with your brand voice, right? If something seems really out of left field, it might throw your reader off. So as long as that is part of your internal culture and your internal brand voice, I think there's always a place for it. I know a lot of people will, throw in like little surveys using Contact Monkey on more like fluff pieces about like, we had these people submit their dog, who has the cutest pet at, X organization, or, if there was a pajama day at work, people do these things, including pictures and having fun with it. So I don't think that internal comms always has to be so serious. Will the presentation be emailed out? I'm sure that's something that I can talk to my marketing team about for sure. Do I find a lot of blocks from IT when adopting email platforms in workplaces? I think IT can really be our friend. I think it is best practice to include them in the conversation early on so that we can get them as a internal cheerleader, if you will, for the project. A tool like Contact Monkey, we're GDPR compliant. We also integrate with your native Outlook or Gmail setup. So you're not here, John, for your question about MailChimp. MailChimp, you're uploading your lists and your content to an external server. With Contact Monkey, everything stays with you. So because of that, we're a lot more compliant and safe. And so IT tend to like us and prefer, a tool like Contact Monkey because of that. Email versus Slack for internal comms, totally. So I think that Slack, and we use Slack at Contact Monkey. Slack is a great internal communications tool for employees to connect, manager to connect, for top down and lateral communications. We have a Slack integration that will be coming out shortly. But I am a firm believer, and when I speak to most organizations, it's a multi-pronged approach. There is no silver bullet to internal comms. There are employees that are going to spend, most of their day in Slack. There are employees that log on and the first thing they check is the intranet. And then there's people that live in your inbox. So you have to meet your employees where you are to truly get that 100% employee engagement rate looks like. And that will look different depending on the organization that you're at. So I think that for the way that I see it, Slack is a little bit more informal when it comes to internal communications. There might be little updates, but you're not going to send through a full company breakdown or maybe an executive communication through Slack. Unless that's part of your culture, it's not typically something that I see when I speak to the clients that we speak to at Contact Monkey. What are your suggestions and ideas for user-generated content for internal comms? Great question. So I think that it's a couple of things. So the first is the cadence, right? The cadence of showing that you don't only take the internal, the user-generated content, but that you use it, right? Contact Monkey, something that we're working on. So at every event, we're always asking people to submit content for us to post on our internal channels, on our LinkedIn, et cetera. So I think that it has to be that two-way feedback channel. We have a survey capability and an open form text. So you can encourage people to submit directly through the content that you're sending. You're not losing them by saying, hey, if you want to submit content, go here to post here, and then we'll take it here. You lose people on the drop off. So I think that actually just being able to have them submit directly inside of your newsletter or where they're already reading and being encouraged to share is the best way to do that. Can you please make a t-shirt or write a blog for PRSA on this topic? I mean, sure. I would love to work with our marketing team to do that. Recognition incentives. Yeah, totally. So I think what I've seen the most that people have started to do is include employee recognition in their newsletters or their updates or their employee profiles. So whether it is celebrating, a career milestone, whether it is celebrating a retirement, maybe it's just someone who is really an exemplar of your company's values. That's a great way to highlight employees in your newsletter. You can also have people upvote it through tools like Contact Monkey, where it's like, hey, give a shout out to this person, and then you can send those results to the recipient. So I think having or incorporating recognition inside of that regular cadence of emails, it really can help to drive other initiatives like pushing your company values. Brandy, do you have an opinion on using cultural moments for internal communications and subject lines for people to read around things like Black History Month? Yeah, I absolutely think so. There are huge campaigns that are sent out using Contact Monkey. I can't remember the organization that we were working with, but they had a whole campaign for International Women's Day. And that was pushed out through internal communications company wide. I think that ties back to your company voice, and it really using those cultural moments helps to represent your and tie back to your values, right? So as long as there is a connection to who you are, I think that those cultural moments can really reaffirm to your employee base who you are as a company, what you stand for, and also what you don't. So I definitely think that there is a place for tying cultural moments to internal comms. All right. If that wraps up our questions, I really want to thank you all for joining me, whether you were having your lunch or just taking time out of your busy schedules. I think we had a great conversation here today. Once again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or through email, and I'd be happy to send over the benchmark report and any other information that you're looking for on Contact Monkey.